Hello historians, welcome to the first chapter review of Legends of Kalos. My name is Garrett XY, leading historian, and I am here to give you the facts and information that you have not received in this chapter, and to look in things in the chapter in greater detail. Right, so hopefully you've read the chapter already, so I don't spoil anything for you, but there's a lot to get through. It's just the first chapter, so let's go. Right, so let's start off with the encampment. Okay, the encampment where they were parked was actually pretty big. Even though we normally think of a camp and we think of, oh, you know, maybe it's a few hundred centimeters in diameter, a few thousand meters. No, this camp was actually pretty big. It was about a mile wide, in a mile in diameter, north, south, east, west. Pretty good size, pretty good information. So it took a while to get from one part of the site to another, longer than you would expect. The team itself were quite small, but they had very highly skilled workers in there, which created the walls of the camp. Normally a camp this small aren't out here fighting wars, but what they would usually do is go out to the smaller towns, the smaller cities that are smaller villages, and what they would do is provide support to these guys in any way, whether it be support with building or support with any skirmishes or issues that they had, right? So they weren't out here fighting the big wars against Gala, against Unova, or anything like that. No, they were just there to help support the smaller teams. As you can see from the first page or so of the story, James' encampment had already saved a small village from a bunch of slavers. Slavers are very, very common. Slavers and Pokemon poachers were very common in this time and this era, and it was something that the Kalos region did not allow, right? So anytime they saw anybody being enslaved, captured, or saw people taking Pokemon in hordes, the King's men would normally come in and put a stop to that, which is what James and his team did. It's good to see, right, that just because these guys are men of war and men of action and men of battle, that they know that they had to fight these guys off. And the slavers weren't weak. These guys are strong people who know how to fight, know how to protect themselves, and know how to use Pokemon in battle. But they were able to do it. Very little casualties. I don't think they had any. And then they were able to go on and continue their time. As we can see, James, who was in charge of the encampment, was Colonel rank, right? 7 ranks up. There are actually other ranks we saw. There was a rank of captain and then the rank of major. And then you had your standard foot soldiers as well. Dealing with the army ranks isn't something that I was looking to talk about today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a session called Hidden Histories, and it will have all the information about the lower ranks of the army there. As you know, James wasn't happy with his portion. He was a warrior. He's come from warriors, and he's been put with an encampment that wasn't out and out in war, right? They were the team that was here to help and serve, and he was really worried about his career. He wanted to be a knight, right? And he was still on his way to become a knight, and he was having issues getting to that knight status because of where he had been placed. Although this battle was famously known as the Battle of the Beginning, when you read it and you learn about it and you get more information about it, it actually does not seem like a battle whatsoever, and more like an ambushment. There was no planning, there was no discernment. This team wasn't even at like direct war. We don't even know who's done the attack. Looking at the story, no one's claimed anything. They're not out here defending themselves for battle or anything like that. They've just been attacked. So it is an ambush. They have been attacked, and in one of the most common ways of battle as well. People using electrodes and using catapults to throw them from the air in order to create mass destruction and mass casualties. Everybody knows that the explosion of a electrode is one of the most powerful attacks there is, if not the most powerful attack, right? Causing so much death and harm. The fact that they were, the lower members and ranks, the teams, even though they were soldiers, they weren't really equipped to deal with a lot of the quick and dangerous runs from the enemy. They weren't equipped to do this off rip. So we saw a lot of them panicking, a lot of them struggling. One of them was the gentleman Eric, who unfortunately got his legs cut off, brutally so. It's unknown whether he survived in the battle or not. I think Klein, who did the damage, really wanted him to live and suffer as a coward, but it wasn't just the fact that he was a coward in my eyes. It was more of a fact that they were untrained to deal with this kind of craziness without any of their their superiors around. Once we saw James and Major Julie come in, we saw that there was a shift and the energy changed, and they were able to come in and defend the team and the troops. So James, of course, started the battle with these mercenaries. It seems that they were a little bit underhanded. The rest of his Pokeballs, I believe he had 2 Pokeballs with him, which was standard for most soldiers. They would have 3 main Pokemon, 1 that they would normally do the ins and outs, which I believe was James Chestnut, and then 2 more for backup, because obviously war's long and tiring. So they'd make sure they have backup in order to be able to rest and swap and to utilize. Many in war never used all 3 at the same time, unless they're in dire straits. They'd normally command 1 and then use that 1 to either tag team and attack, or defend and attack, or do some sort of paralysis attack. There's so many different techniques that soldiers use with their Pokemon in order to make sure they defeat the enemy. James tend to use Chestnut in a fantastic way, where we can see that he would use Chestnut's brute strength in order to push down and knock down the enemy, making it easy for James to come in with his sword and land finishing blows, right? That way it keeps both of them, with high stamina throughout the rest of the fight, because all they're doing is 1 hit each, right? 1 hit from the from Chestnut, buckling and tripping over his opponents, and then 1 swipe from James in order to finish the enemy off. This isn't a Pokemon battle, this is dangerous and you're fighting for your life. You haven't got the time to waste your stamina. You've got to get the job done quick and kill your opponents where you can. However, we actually don't have any idea of how many mercenaries have actually fully come in at this point and have fully or surrounding the encampment and could come in any other time. So the fact that James has lost his 2 other Pokeballs puts him at a real big disadvantage, and it is a big shame, because he's the most powerful man at that camp, right? His strength actually rivals that of a knight, has been said, which was another reason why people were unsure why he was still a colonel when he should have been easily a knight. The rest of his family members were already knights. His father and uncles were all knights. He's the only one in the family who hasn't achieved that status as of yet. At this point, I want to give a shout out to Major Julie, who stood by James's side in this battle. He's clearly a very, very strong assistant to have by your side in times like this. He didn't back down. He was quick, he was strong. He immediately took charge. He already had a report for James the second they met, and he had no problem wading into the battle in order to make sure that they had as little casualties as possible. He of course has his fantastic Pokemon of Cleaver and Croconaw. Those are the 2 that he tends to use in battle. As I of course said, most people tend to use 1 at a time due to the aspects and the fact that they were fighting against fire Pokemon. He obviously used too this time. Croconaw to help with the water aspect and the type advantage over the Growlithe and the Houndour that were there, but the real brass and power that comes from his team comes from the Cleavor. As we can see, you know, Cleavor swipes and attacks and damages people so much so that Major Ghoulie doesn't really have to do much, but he's really agile and quick. That's where his strength comes from, his agileness, his agility, right? He can get in and get out, cut in, cut out. He normally uses a small, slight blade, not as something as big as the broadsword that James uses in order to attack. He has a small, slight blade and that he uses to just bap in and out of the opponent, finishing them off while letting Cleavor take the brunt of the attack. So, you know, fantastic utilization and skill from him, showcasing what, even though this is a small encampment, it gives you an idea of how powerful the army truly is, because this was only a small group of people, a small battalion, and they're not battle ready, and these two alone are showing you the real strength. The rest of them, they're so low rank that they can't keep Pokemon that are higher than level 15. They haven't got that ability. So a lot of them are using Bidoofs, Butterfrees, low level Pokemon, but because they were so unorganized, obviously because they were attacked, they were unable to really defend themselves. It was only till Major Ghoulie and Colonel James stepped up and got to the north of the camp to help protect the team that they were able to actually collect themselves and fight back properly, it's been said. So by the end of the chapter, it looks like the camp is now under complete attack. It looks like James and Major Ghoulie have everything under control, or are getting things under control, but we've lost the Kalos army have lost you know, quite a few men so far. Whether that's going to continue or not, we'll have to wait and see. I'm currently at this process, you know, transcribing the second chapter, so you know that will be coming out on the first Friday of next month. So, you know, make sure you check in and see what's happening, and I believe that that will be the final chapter of the Battle of the Beginning, and then after that you'll get the aftermath of what really now started this war. You know, the war and the destruction, you know, with Prince or King AZ. What happened with him? Why is he the only person in history that we've ever been told about? All these lies that we've been told, I will slowly, month by month, chapter by chapter, start to break these down and give you guys more of an insight into what Kalos was really like, all right? What the legends of Kalos was really like, and how we got to the point of the destruction and why it happened. I've never once before seen in my life, right, a history documentary of war and only hear one person's name. It doesn't make sense, right? But luckily these books that I've found give us the information and the lead up to that, so that way I can transcribe it and give you guys the information, and together we can learn about the true history of Kalos. Okay, historians? Excellent. Before I forget, I can't, you know, not make an honourable mention to Amelie, who, you know, provided James with a lot of, how do I say this delicately, support and company before the ambush took place. She works at one of the pleasure houses in Limios. There are several of them. We'll probably learn more about them and their integral role into the structure of the region as we go along. But she decided to go to and go on tour with James in order to make sure that she has that experience. A lot of girls used to go and work alongside warriors, you know, during wartime. It was just normal. They'd follow in the back with the chefs and with the assistants and the servants, and they would just be there for when war wasn't on. They wouldn't be there on the battlefield normally, as they are today, unfortunately. But normally they're there in the quiet times, at the night times, when there's no battles going on. They're normally there to serve. James had taken a liking to her. I think he'd spent a lot of time with her and realized she's somebody he wanted by his side whilst he was at war. It's not usual for somebody to have a girl to themselves. Normally there's a group of women taken, and in this case it's no different. There were a group of women there at that campsite, but usually it's not one. They normally like to make sure they're around everyone, and the guys normally take their time going through all the ladies, respectfully of course, and consensually of course. The team of Kalos warriors weren't brutes, and the ones that were brutes were called out immediately, because these were the kind of men and women that were there. They wouldn't accept any sort of slavery, any sort of forcing of yourselves on people. That wasn't something that Kalos stood for. As a culture, they loved war, they loved fighting, but they weren't about the enslavement of people. They didn't like it. So that was something, Amelie knew that she could go and trust James and know that nothing would happen to her. And he proved it. When the ambushment started, his first thoughts turned to even before his own postmen that were there. And then once he realized she was safe, he felt a lot better. And I think that made going into battle a little bit easier. So honorable mention to her. Great. So next chapter coming out soon, and the review will come out with it at the same time. Make sure to watch and make sure to read, and then let me know what you think. If you have any questions whatsoever, put them in the comments, and then I'll go through them and make another video answering the questions. All right, historians, Garrett out. Bye.